So we've got a disc guy. So I'm going to try and give everyone about 10-ish minutes. If you're not familiar with the format, this is Feedback Friday. If you are a Twitch sub, you can join the Discord and submit photos for feedback. There's a private channel. You have to link your Discord with your Twitch handle, and you will get access to a private channel called Feedback Fridays, where I take a look at some of your models and give some quick feedback on them. So what we got here is let's see what he says about this guy, okay? So, fresh sub. This is my first competition piece, so this is done for competition. This is display. And he apparently submitted it to the Squidmar Open standard, which I happen to know that the judging is done on. So, should see that soon, I think. The results soon. But let's take a look, see what we got, okay? So first thing I would say is if this is for competition level, generally like the lighting and stuff is pretty good, but we can definitely focus on a few things here that I would work on. So one of them being just like some of the level of cleanliness, you know, some blending could certainly be better. I think the light placement and stuff overall is pretty nice. The swords could definitely use some work with the reflections there, but in terms of general look, I think it's pretty cool. But let's talk about some blending stuff. Kakud Neil. Hi. Hello. Sorry, I'm bad at pronouncing names. All right. So yeah, so things like this area, right? The white typically is pretty easy to get. It can get a little chalky. Just try it. Maybe start with a gray first. Okay. You know, and try and layer up from here. This might help with some of this chalkiness, this patchiness that you have with the gray. Okay, so maybe start with a more light gray and then build up your layers here. I often find it easier to blend it down too, so like go a little heavier on the white how you want it, like this, right? And then blend down. So take your light gray and kind of like glaze down into the gray will help. You might find this a little easier to smooth that transition than trying to blend upwards to the light. Okay? Now, next thing. Yeah, same over here, right? So like, see this kind of patchiness to it? Like, go a little heavier, right? And you'll end up with something like this. I'll do it on this knee too, right? So you'll end up with something along this line. Right? Then you can come back with something in between these two. So we find a color that's like something along these lines. And then you can kind of like blend around it, and you can also sort of shrink that shape if you need. Okay. So you glaze around this shape and shrink that light. All right. That'll give you a bit of might be a little easier to smooth that transition that way. Next thing is like when you're doing these edge highlights, try and like if they get a little thick, come back with like the dark color that's around them, and you can thin them out a little. Okay, so it's like you're erasing the line work that you've done. This will result in some thinner lines here. The face I think is pretty good. The eyes are, you know, not the best, but they're all right. I understand that these are very tiny. Okay, so this purple reflective stuff that you got going on from the head, okay? It's maybe a little sharp here. Like, it's hard to tell if it's supposed to be coming from like the head or not, but if you're gonna throw these in, like, you should probably have them reflect on some of the side parts here, like maybe it'll reflect like in the armor here. Okay. So this is one of those things that I try and say, like, if you're going to do it, you got to do it. Like, don't half-ass it on this stuff, right? Like, if you're going to throw in these sorts of effects, like, you need to really put it in, right? All right. And then, yeah, blending stuff like this, right? So I think the general kind of feedback would be like, yeah, work on cleanliness. Now, the sword, okay, when you're doing non-metallic metal, and I've talked about this a lot, like you need to pick, especially on like a flat surface like this, you need to pick one part of the blade, and then we've got these laser reflections that we've talked about before, okay? Avoid these like lasers, all right? You don't want these like super thin, like what you're doing is you've got this like dark area, okay? And then you're trying to like highlight, but you're running out of space. So you're like, I gotta highlight more, okay? And then you're like, oh, I gotta highlight inside that, and then you highlight more, and then you end up with this like thin little line, all right? Try and spread that out, right? So you first, when you have a flat surface, right, whatever this long flat surface is, you need to pick one spot that's the main reflection, and then your other spots can be secondary reflections, but they should never be as bright as your main reflection. Okay, so I'm going to just kill this. Just get rid of it. All right. And then we can add in some extra reflections in here. So you can have these like secondary reflections, okay, that aren't as large as your main reflection. So maybe I do something like this, and then I can push this a little bit more, something like that. But even this like lighter gray is not as intense as this, like what would be a white reflection. All right. So something like that might be a little more natural looking. All right. So you can see the difference between this like laser reflection and this more subtle, like longer gradient, right? Because it's this long gradient across the whole surface that then has this like nuance inside of it. As far as other parts go, like I generally like the focus. There's a nice kind of focus on his face. The lighting around here is very strong, so that's good. I think you could play around with some of these parts. So you have these metallic parts here. You can make these look a little more shiny by not necessarily going like pure black on the front. You can separate these shapes out a little bit by trying to make them more geometric, right? So maybe there's a little more light on the front of this. Okay, something like this. And then we can really like push that white. Now you can also like play around with like a slight amount of yellow to your whites. Something like an ivory will also tend to make the really light reflections like appear a bit more white. Okay. And then don't edge highlight the same all the way across the surface, right? So pick certain parts of the edge, what I've referred to as danger edges. I recommend watching me talk about non-metallic metal. But there should be like certain edges that are going to be like, that are facing towards the viewer that are going to stand out a little bit more. So even like on his hand, right? Certain spots are going to catch more light than others. Okay, so don't edge highlight the metallic all the same. You want to pick areas of that edge that catch more light. Okay. And last thing I want to mention is like here the red is getting a little dark when you're doing capes and things. Make sure that like here we can push a little more focus by having the top part of the tabard be like a little bit brighter towards the body, right? Towards the head as it kind of goes up. And then right here, yeah. So I can push this a little bit more. Something like that. Okay. That's my big feedback. Other than that, like we'll just work on general cleanliness and stuff, and that should help out. Yeah. Okay. Let's switch back over. Let me find the next guy. All right, Brush Mamba. Also new here, was looking for a good place to put my Prime sub. Well, thank you. Latest work. I don't know whether I will actually fix things, but all feedback is good. All right, so let's grab this one. All right, this is pretty cool actually. This is a neat figure. So let's take a look. Stalker 85. Thank you for the Prime. Appreciate it. All right, and yeah. So we got this Techno Viking. Okay. So general thoughts are it's pretty good. We got some interesting colors. The skin's pretty nice and smooth. Generally, like some of the non-metallics are pretty nice. I think the tattoo is pretty cool. I like the Yggdrasil and the knotwork going on. I think it's pretty strong, but we can do some work to improve some of this stuff a little bit. Huh? I'm using the Apple Pencil. I'm doing this on Procreate, by the way, in case anybody's curious. This is Procreate. So, okay. Yeah, so I like the tattoo. Okay with the face. We're going to talk about the face quite a bit, but the tattoo work is pretty good. One thing you can do with tattoos, okay, so when you're doing tattoo work, you can come back at the end, all right? And if you want the tattoo to feel slightly older, right, you can come back with some, this is going to be, I'll turn it on and off so you can see it, but you can come back with some of your skin tone and like glaze over the top with your base skin tone or whatever skin tone that it's on top of, all right? And you glaze some of that skin tone over top of the tattoo. And what this is going to do is it's going to make it look like the tattoo's like under the skin, right? And it's like he's had the tattoo for a while. All right, so it's going to unify it with the skin a little bit. Then I'm going to take like this skin highlight and I'm going to grab like a highlight color. You also get this like reflectivity over top of the skin. So we need to think about like where the highlight on his chest would be. And then something like this. So now from before and after, like you can see this looks like a fresh tattoo, like super fresh. And this looks like it's like he's had it for a little bit and it's like the ink is now under the skin, right? Okay. So on the face, right? When you apply these highlights really strong to like the center of the face, it causes the head is round, right? There is like, it is somewhat cylindrical, you know, like this. What is that? Manga Tuga. Thank you for the follow. Welcome. So it is cylindrical, but we don't want it to be, the front of the face is slightly more flat than that, right? If you look at me, like the side of my temples and stuff are not super dark. Okay. So don't overshadow the side of the face too much. Like try and pull this light over a little bit. Like his forehead is a little more square than you're applying. Also, don't overdo the shadows of the cheek too much. Okay. Then this light here, right? Then we can push this light out a little bit. My painter of things. Thanks for the prime. Appreciate it. All right. So like pull this light out a little. Okay. We can add some more light to the cheeks. Same thing with like the applying that glaze over top of the tattooing, right? And then we need to like really push the highlights a little bit on the face here. So I'm gonna go smaller, right? We need some like highlight to really define some elements. So we can push that light on the forehead now that we've like spread out the light some. And we can like start to try and create some of this volume here. Like this expression also could probably use a little bit of definition on like some of these smaller wrinkles on the face. So even like taking some of this slightly darker color here, we can begin to like define some of the like eyebrow wrinkles and stuff. I want to like try and define the nostrils a little bit more to really get that like snarling look. Okay. You can also, right, apply some light here, right? So just think about like the colors that you're working with. Try and not overdo too much, but like, yeah, there should probably be some like wrinkles and stuff in his skin to really create that like angry look that you're going for. All right. Okay. Next thing. All right, the metallics. Dirty Cod, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. So, metallics, right? You've got to define. I like that you've done this, right? There's like this consistency with these reflections. So you've painted it like one solid volume. That's really good. But we have to, if you want to make it look metallic, you've got to really like define these edges more. Okay, so this edge has to like come all the way across. You can't. You gots to paint the edges, all right? It's the most important step to any non-metallic effect. Defining the edges is what's really going to sell this effect. So like here you can see as I even on the bottom, like I define the edge, it doesn't need to be as intense as the top edge. But it's important to get that edge definition in there. So now just by like defining the edge of that chest plate piece, you can see like it looks more metallic-y. Okay. Then you can start to think about like, okay, do I want to introduce like a second light source? High falling freely, low. Now you may want to consider like adding another little reflection point, okay? Something like this, right? Maybe there's this second reflection that kind of goes down to create more interest. And then your light source tends to go a bit more yellowish, right? As you go up in light. So we can do the same thing with the metallics. Okay, so yours is very like just blue right now. Adding this like more yellowish reflection at the end, that's like the final light, will help sell that consistency with the light source. Now it seems very yellow at the moment, but when you look at it in context with the rest, and then when we push it even brighter, it'll feel pretty natural, like with the rest of the lighting. So Here I go yellow towards the end, and then at the very end, at like the last brightest point, I can push that to like a white or an ivory, whatever. And that'll make that feel like even more shiny and reflective. Okay. So anywhere where you have that yet, you got to make sure you define all these edges really well. Okay. Really define. Definition is everything when it comes to miniature painting in general, but especially non-metallics. Like, you got to make those edges look sharp, right? And you did it quite well over here, but I think you could push the light like even more, right? Okay, this gives it that like hard line. And then like this, right? You got to like define this bottom edge also. So the difference in, right, even like down here, right? So I might take something like this tone and create like a line at the bottom. And then probably have a dark line next to that to push the definition even more. So there would be like a dark line underneath. Okay. So something along those lines. Okay. But yeah, you got to push some of these highlights a little bit more. I feel like you're not pushing the lights quite enough. And those highlights are what really like is going to give more shape and stuff to some of these areas. Okay. Cool. I hope that's helpful. Hi, Dan. All right, let's pull up the next one. Murph. First bust I've ever painted, looking for feedback. Cool. All right, let's save this guy. See if there's another angle that I want to look at. Yeah, this is okay. But actually I do want to look at that angle. All right, so this front view is okay. So we'll look at the front view real quick. I'm not going to talk about the front view too much. Well, maybe. All right. So not bad, but a little boring. Okay. And very like kind of washed out. It's just like sort of flat. Okay. So what I mean by that is like, there's like no color to the skin, right? It's very gray. The leather is like very gray. Okay. The biggest parts that have like color is the tentacle thing here and like his scarf. All right. So we need to push some contrast here, but also push the color progression. Okay. Hi, Drez and one rando man. Thanks for following. So what I mean by that is like, say you have a color like this, right? Let's look at this sort of coloration here. Okay. So we have this sort of color, right? And then what does it go to? It goes to this. Okay. And then it goes to this. All right. And let's look at how it moves around this, like how it goes around the wheel when we select the different colors. So we're right here. Yeah. See the wiggle? We're right there. All right. And then let's look at this one. We didn't move. And let's look at this one. We really didn't move. All right. So what's happening is all you're doing is just adding white, right? So you're just going from one color to the next color to the next color by adding white. We want to like shift. We want to play with the color variation. So let's take this guy and let's move it a little more purplish, right? Just a bit more magenta. So instead of that, maybe it starts here. And then let's look at this one's fine. If that's his true like mid-tone, that's fine. And then instead of this, right, let's go slightly more salmony, right? Something like this. Okay. So now what'll happen when you do that is it's going to progress through, like, the color is going to get like a bit warmer as you go through the colors. The actual color of the thing itself doesn't really change, but you kind of advance through some coloration. Okay, so on like the hood here, or on the leather here, let's add a bit more saturation to the shadows. Yeah, something like this. Okay, we can go like a bit more reddish brown, right? Something like that. And then we can go up slightly more orangish and we start to lose some, we get a little more color here, right? And then in the midtones, we get a little more brown, this orangish brown, right? Then as we move to the lights, we get something like this, right? So it's like, as we push into the lights, I'm not saying this is the way you have to do it, like through this color progression. It could also get colder, like you could have warmer shadows and colder lights, but you're playing with the tone, right? The hue is shifting as you move up in the lights, right? And if we do that with the skin, see here, it's like kind of more reddish. What happens here? It's now shifted more orange, and now it's shifted. So you're doing that shift, but you've lost like all the color to the skin, right? It's so desaturated that you just like have no color in the skin whatsoever. So like, let's play around a bit with the saturation, especially in his face. Right, I'm going to try and add some color to his face. So now I can move up something like this. Maybe not quite that much, and then cool it all, right? So add a bit more color. Okay. And then boom, and then I can come up to something like this, and now I have this like more warm skin tone at the end here that's going to create like a nice coloration. Okay. Now I've talked about like color zones of the face and stuff, and how to add more. I'm not going to go too much into that here at this stage, but you can like play around with the coloration in the skin also and add like different interesting color zones to the skin. But for right now, just like what I would recommend is just try and like be a little more, don't like gray everything out too fast. You want some saturated areas and some desaturated areas, but you also don't want it to just like look like just the same. Okay. Especially like here, right? It's just like everything's just gray. Okay. So if I could play around with a color that's like slightly more like this, right? And I can create shadows on the white with like a more bluish tone. Right? Something like this. And then as I move up, then I can go through like some of these more warmer whites, right? And it still reads as white, but it's got like some color interest to it, okay? And then end with maybe something like this. Right, so the hat's still white, right? But I have color shifting in there. Okay. I hope that was interesting. Now, the next thing is what I would do is I would probably take some of this blue or something close to this bluish tone, maybe like a darker, almost purple blue. And I would consider like doing some sort of, I don't know. I'm not saying like exactly like this, but I would consider adding some sort of patterning to the fish or the tentacle here, because it's just like this big flat area. Use reference for stuff like this, like just look up like octopus or whatever, squids, and see what kind of different weird patterning they get. But this can add like a lot more interest to such like a big kind of boring area, you know? Okay. I think that could make it a lot more exciting. Yeah. All right. Cool. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for the feedback. Very helpful. Do you think it can be saved by glazing in that? Yeah, you can definitely glaze it in. No, you don't have to fresh start. Just glaze. Metal as real. Like pure pigments tend to have a bit more coloration to them. You can use like more transparent paints and stuff to add sort of that coloration. Inks and things would work really well for the leather, you know. So yeah, it's pretty easy to add some coloration back in. Okay. So let's find the next guy. Who's the next? Okay. Papa Singe. This is cool. Northern Prophet. Hello. Thanks for the prime. Appreciate it. Okay. Let's look at this guy. Oof, this is good. How about this thing, huh? It's pretty good. Pretty good here. How big is this? This has got to be like huge because these faces are like tiny. Yeah, I mean, generally I think this is really strong. I really like a lot of the coloration that's going on. Like face is like rendered, like volumes are rendered really well here. Horns are rendered well. Like generally you have a pretty dang strong understanding of light and stuff. So from a overall look, like I think this is really strong. Okay. Eric, do you seldom avoid using? I often avoid using like pure white. I tend to go like with like a slightly off white. That way I have the opportunity to like use like a dot of pure white if I need to. Yeah, so this is cool. What I would say is I think there's some opportunity here to do some stuff with like focus a little bit. So you've got a lot of color like on, you got a lot of light on his stomach and chest, which is fine, but I think you could pull the focus a little bit better. So what I would think about doing is you have this kind of like slightly dark purplish color down here. Right? It's like almost blue. I think you could take and just like reduce some of the light towards the bottom. Okay. Let me put, yeah, this is a lot of there. Okay. So what we can do here is we can kind of like not too much. Right? We can lower the lighting on his like the lower part of his body. Okay. So by pushing the shadows a little bit more lower down and kind of to the outside, right? We're gonna pull more attention like towards the face. So I think like here, and I'll do it a little smaller here, right? So we can like define some of this stuff a little bit more, right? We can push these shadows, kind of just reduce these things a bit. And what this will do is when we look at it as a whole, right, like the entire figure, it's going to help push that lighting, like, or it's going to help push the viewer's focus a little bit more towards the face, right? So, and then I'm going to erase this just a tiny bit because it got a little too much. Okay. So you can see now sort of the difference between like this and this, like this helps draw more attention. Yeah, it's like a vignette, right? So this is going to help draw more attention to the face. Okay. And like I can tone this down just a touch, right? So if I want to like bring some light back in certain areas, I can, but just a little bit can go a long way to like helping draw attention. All right. The next thing is I think some of these areas under here are lacking a little bit. So what I mean is like some of these areas of the horns would catch some highlights. So like try and come in and like give some more texture in here. I'm not going to sit here and try and do it perfect, but like there should probably be a bit more information in these parts. Okay, the light would probably hit here and you would get this like reflect this small highlight. It's because it's the same as like right here, right, in terms of orientation. So you would likely get a bit of a highlight on that section of the horn. And you can see the difference sort of between the two. You did it a bit on this one, but I think you do it a little bit more. Okay, so don't be afraid to get some information in there, right? Some of this is maybe doesn't, I would consider like moving this highlight here, right? You want it a little bit more centralized to match the lighting of the rest of the shape. Okay, so make this like main reflection of the bell a little more centralized to match the reflections on his skin. Okay. So we're going to push that slightly more to the middle. Something like that. Like all these little things. Okay, I can't quite tell. I'm guessing these are supposed to be leather straps. These. There may be instead of metal. I'm not quite sure. But instead of gray, if they're supposed to be leather, maybe consider using like a slightly more grayish brown. So you can like play with these like desaturated grays, right? And like maybe define these a little bit more. They're so similar in color to the metallics that they're kind of reading as metallic, similar to what you did on the rope, right? So like as we play with it, we can make it like slightly more yellowish, and then try and define these and just like get them to not be quite the same as the metallic parts, right? And what else? feel like you're slightly worried about how much light you put on these, don't get too concerned, but like you can push the light on some of these metallic elements, these really like front-facing elements. You're kind of overdoing it with the edge, like the edge definition, and not giving enough definition to the volume, okay? So like some of these little volumes here, right, should be quite bright, right? So it's like this might catch more light, something like that. And it's going to give some more shape like to individual panels. Like this is really good, okay? Right here, like this makes sense. You need to do it on some of these smaller parts too, so they're not like getting lost, okay? So slightly more intermediate grays and things. Cool. Yeah, I think that's the big one for me. Dude, like the face is super good on this guy. So really quite impressive. And yeah, the skin and stuff is really cool too. You could maybe push this just like a little bit more. Like if you're going for like an internal glow kind of thing here, like you can maybe push the light just a touch more. And then like a little bit of like almost pure white right here. Something like that. Nice, man. This is cool. But yeah, I think the biggest thing is going to just be like focus, working on some of the focal elements, right? All right, cool. Thanks for showing us that one. Mr. Jim Jeff. Okay, I have to look at this one because the other one is very noisy. So, okay. Let's go and look at this guy, this pirate man. Hi, Jim. All right, so this is cool, right? I like the colors. The face is looking quite good. The leather is reading as leather. I liked all the little cracks and stuff. Really nice. Where I think we could improve this guy. So one thing is the hair, all right? And I've talked about this before, but like, let the skin color, all right? I'm gonna make a new layer. Okay. You can let some of the skin color like go into the beard a bit more, right? So what I typically will do is I'll actually paint the skin like over the edge of the beard a little bit. I'll actually like paint it into the beard. Okay. Because you don't want these dark lines. If you want to see a really good example of how like the edge of a beard should look, let me see if I can find it real quick. So, nope. Let me go to me before I go doing all that. Actually, Sebastian or someone who's like around, could somebody post the John Chan spirit bust he did recently in the Feedback Friday of the Discord, or in just like the general chat? It's the one of the two gnomes, if you know what I'm talking about. But so you want the the skin to like come into overlap into the beard. Somebody post that for me. Let me look. Yeah. Jen, you got it. All right, cool. So let's look at this guy real quick. All right. So this is what I mean by like, see how soft the edge of the beard looks, right? Because the skin tone is like going into the under the beard, and then there isn't this like dark line at the edge of the beard. You really don't want any shadow at like the edge of the beard unless that shadow is like the skin is in shadow, right? The white hairs look very natural and growing out of them. Okay, you can see on me like there isn't a dark shadow line where the beard starts. You tend to see like the lighter hairs on the edge of the beard. Okay, so that transition should feel pretty natural. Okay, so that's what I mean by like starting with the skin tone, and then you only paint like the lighter hairs at like the edge. Okay. So you'll get a much more natural transition between these two things. Also, like, don't be afraid to like paint some of the lines of the beard like a little higher than the actual like beard itself, right? The like sculpted part. Let it like, some of these hairs might like start up here, right? And then like transition into the actual like sculpted elements. So you can paint like lines on top of the skin, and maybe even like you grab something like this sort of gray, and maybe there's like, you can do these like little bits of stray hairs or shorter hairs that are in like maybe his upper lip has like some shorter hairs or something, right? But between this, right, where it's so dark there, and this, like the after, right, should feel much more natural. Okay? Next thing is I would consider, you've got these sort of nice reds here. I would consider adding some of these into some areas like his nose. Okay. Maybe a little bit more in the cheek. Also, I think maybe that's like a little too sunken right there, right? I don't think you have to push the shadow quite that much on his cheek. Okay. And then I think for the collar, right? I think we could consider like, I see you've kind of done like a stippling, but I think you could be like a bit heavier with it, okay? So like you can blend with like stippling instead. So like these dots, and I'll kind of do it here. And you sort of let them like disperse so they get like a little more spread out as you go down. So you do them more concentrated in one part, okay? This will introduce like another kind of texture, and I think this sort of wool pattern is like very natural for these like kind of pirate jackets, okay? Right, and then we can add a little bit more, and we can do like a concentrated sort of area like this, right? Dot, 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 right? And it's like a way to introduce another kind of texture here into the fabric that I think feels pretty natural, because you have like this really strong texture here on the leather, Then he's kind of got this like leathery skin, and then you have this texture on the beard. I think that now having another kind of texture, a different sort of texture on the wool parts could be nice. In terms of the lighting, I think it's quite good. I don't have much to say there. I think you could maybe define some elements a little bit more, like maybe his mouth could be a bit more defined. I'm missing sort of that like separation of the upper and lower lip. I think you could push some lighting into like areas like this. Okay. Some of these are maybe like a little heavy. I'm also curious like how much let me look back at the Discord real fast and see how much you're trying to do of a cast shadow. I'm not quite sure. It's hard to see in the picture. Yeah, so not really, but yeah, I think you could play around a little bit more. There's a little bit more definition and stuff. And yeah, you're maybe overdoing the shadows a tiny bit on the face. So like some areas you're getting really, really dark really fast, and I think you don't quite have to go that much. Like this still works as a shadow, right? Without being like ultra dark. Okay. So we can adjust that just a little bit to create a bit more natural transition there. Okay. Hi, sir. Thanks for your inspiring work. I did my first contest bust on your torn inspiration. Much love. Thank you. Cool, Jim. Makes sense. All right. I think the ear could also have a little bit more reddish tone in it too. Okay. Just a touch more red in the ear could be nice. Yeah, something like that. Okay. Cool. All right. Next. Hello, I'm new here. My partner and I share the hobby. Unfortunately, due to the time difference, we can't watch the live stream. However, we'll always watch the videos after. It's my partner's latest work. If there's a chance, I would like to ask for some feedback. Sure. All right. Hey, Claytron. Okay, so overall, think it's pretty cool. This is a cool bust. There is so much going on the here. I'm not going to talk about this stuff too much. This is literally an exercise in like just like defining and painting small details. What I will talk about is some of the face. Okay. So the first thing, it seems like you are layering a lot and your paint is getting kind of grainy. Like you can see the graininess to it. Okay. This happens because you are overworking the paint. So you can see areas where like you don't work the paint that much. You're more confident and you don't, it doesn't build up. This texture is bad. So this happens when you're like working back and forth a lot and like applying maybe too many layers at a time, right? And it tends to get this like graininess to it from just like layer after layer after layer, okay, of trying to like smooth everything, but then it ends up grainy. Okay. What I would say is like the face right now is very flat in terms of like, not in terms of contrast, but in terms of like micro volumes. Okay, so it's like the face doesn't have much form to it. It's the sculpt itself is very subtle. Cursed Ducky and Grady Cola and Mita. Thanks for following. Yeah, Cotaway, it's not every Friday, it's every other Friday. This is a subscriber review. So what we can do is we want to push definition in some areas and then also maybe invent some volumes in others. All right, so I'm going to grab this sort of mid-tone here. We're gonna take like a mid skin tone, and you can create some volumes. Like we're going to invent some volumes on the face, right? So we're gonna like draw the face, okay? So something like this, right? We know we've got these folds. You've sort of defined them, but we're gonna define them more with mid-tone, right? So we can define those just a little bit, right? We don't need a lot. We know we also have these sort of shapes here, okay? Now we want to push the side of the nose a little bit. All right. So I'm gonna like overdo it for you guys so you can really see the shapes, and then we're gonna like make it more subtle. So what am I looking for, right? I want to find certain shapes. Let me draw in another layer. So in terms of like shape of the face, right? Like what do we have? We have the nose, something like this, and then there's like the side of the nose that kind of comes like this. Okay. There's these sorts of shapes. Then you have like the bottom of the nose. You have this shape here, 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 right? And then there's these kind of triangles on the cheekbones. You have these sort of connect down like this. I'm drawing like basic polygon shapes, right? You have this sort of shape, this sort of shape. You get this shape underneath the jaw, and then the chin is like round, and then you have this like big shape on the side of the face, okay? Something like that, right? So you have all these little shapes. Okay, and we want to try and create those shapes underneath, right? So we're going to start like pushing some of that shape. Oops, trying to draw on the wrong layer. Right, so we're going to push some of those shapes, and then we'll reduce it to make it more subtle. Okay, you also have this shape like under the eye, so you can paint under the eyelid a little more, right? So this is that shape of the nose we were talking about. The like side of the nose. Okay, you have this shape here. This is pretty good. All right, now we're going to use some light to like rethink the shape of the face. Okay, so where are we going to get light? We're going to get light like here and here. Then you get a little light here, right? These little like balls on the side. Okay. Then you've already got the pretty strong light on the cheek, the triangle, right? Okay, something like that. Now, there's probably too much shadow in here. Okay, so we need to grab something that's like intermediate to this. You don't need this much shadow in the jaw, right? It's going to make the face like extremely gaunt, like too sunken. Okay. Whoa, what are you doing? Okay, so I'm gonna like push a little bit here just to like not make it quite so sunken in. Right? Now, what do we do now? Now we have to like start to blend these together, right? So I'm gonna soften certain areas and leave certain areas defined. Okay, so like shrinking these little shapes in the corner of the mouth. Okay, I can soften here the triangles of the cheekbones. Okay, then I want to connect this light, right? So the next thing is to like connect like this. Okay. So like here and here, we're going to create a connection between these two. Something like that. And then we can have this light come up a little bit on the nose. Okay. Now, you can also, now we're going to start to take and like wrap some of these elements. So some of these like smaller lines, right? This isn't like a straight line, right? It's not like that. It has a curve to it, and that curve goes like this, right? So we want to try and get in that little bit of a curve here, but this upper lip should like disappear into that next volume, okay? Okay, then we can soften some things some more. All right, now the last step is to really push these highlights, okay? So now we want to like take and grab some like real highlight colors, and we want to think about where these highlights are going to hit. So you're going to have like a bit more highlight here on like the upper cheekbone. And this is going to round out the face a little bit. Okay, so like on the cheekbone, Okay, upper lip. The nose. All right, it's a little bit in the corner of the nose here. A little bit on the chin, a little bit in the corner of the mouth. Okay, and then we'll soften again. Okay. And then yeah, you kind of just start to like blend things together, right? So overall, right, we create more like shape to the face that's not really sculpted, and create something a little more interesting overall. Okay. Right. So before, right, where her face was like super, she's like this, like, you know, doing fish lips where it's like everything sunk in. Yeah, you can post reference. Absolutely. Right? So where everything was like sunken in, now we have like a bit more form to the face, right? All right. Other than that, yeah, I mean, I like what you got going down on here. This is probably like this shadow is probably a little heavy, but that's okay. Maybe try something slightly more like this sort of tone, right? Maybe not quite so pure or so quite so dark. right? It's still skin tone, so like don't go like overboard with the shadow there. Yeah. I know you said you didn't get the chance to watch it live, but I hope that was helpful and cool. Okay, let's jump to the next one. Oh, we got people posting new stuff. All right, where was I? All right, that one. Balrog. Hey, I'm new here and a bit scared to share this with high quality, blah, blah, blah. I'm honored for your feedback. Beginner, beginning, I think, to have a heavy hand. Timid attempted OSL. Okay. OSL lesson time. So, this one should be interesting. So, okay. We got this Balrog. Lots of OSL. I think the Balrog itself is pretty cool. But you have broken one of the cardinal rules of OSL. And what that is that OSL, okay, OSL, for anyone who doesn't know, organic source lighting. So things like flames, torches, glowy things. Okay, that's OSL. We're painting simulated lighting effects. The number one rule of lighting, of any sort of light, okay, is that the object that is emitting light, there's two big rules. The light source itself has to be the brightest part, okay? And the second rule is that any light that it casts, okay, it can only make things brighter. Okay, so let's put it in, let's do a little thing here. All right, and we're going to put this guy in black and white real quick. Okay. Let's look right here, okay? See on the stone there? Okay. There is light being orange light on this part of the stone, okay? And that orange light has to be brighter than the stone itself, okay? So what you've done, all right, is when you went to paint this red glow on it, it's actually darker than the gray stone itself, this like bluish gray stone. Okay, so we have to take this color here, whatever this is, right? This is like sort of our, let's grab like the neutral stone color. Okay, it's somewhere down here in this like dark gray. Okay, now we need to move up in value. And then we need to move this way towards orange. All right. And then that has to be brighter than the stone itself. Okay. Now, fire tends to get kind of reddish. Toward reddish. It's like reddish orange. It's like this sort of orangey tone. All right. So light also falls off. There's this thing called the inverse square law that the further away you get from the light source, the light begins to quickly decrease in strength on an exponential scale. All right. So the amount of lighting is going to be most intense directly near the light source. Okay. So though it will affect out here a little bit, where it's like we're going to make this like more of a grayish tone because blue plus orange is like pure gray, right? So as we come down the bridge, this light is going to fall off, right? So it'll be slightly grayish like this, okay? And then as we get closer to the light source, it will intensify in color and strength. All right, so we'll start to get tones more like this, right? As we get close to the flame, and then that will quickly decrease in strength, and then as we get even closer to the flame, it's going to get brighter still until we get something like this. Okay, now what's the problem? All right, what's our next issue? Okay, did we fix the value problem, right? It's now getting brighter as it moves towards the flame. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so see how the grays are increasing as it gets towards the flame in terms of like how bright the gray is. That makes sense. But now the actual flame itself is darker than the light that it's emitting. So we have to, I'm going to do this with an add layer just because it's easier. Okay, this needs to be like this. All right, so push the value of that flame a lot. All right, I don't even use pure red like in my flames. I use like orange and yellow, and then I let the slightly reddish tones that it emits onto things, right? I let that be what sells it as like a red flame, okay? Or like reddish, right? So like really like go up a lot, all right? Like push that brightness of that fire. All right. Then we can take, and yeah, maybe this is not quite the right color now. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take like this more fiery orange red. Okay. I'm going to set this to like a color mode. Maybe this is a more natural color for like emitting flame on here. Okay. You'll notice with flames, like they don't turn super yellowish. The light that they cast tends to be on the more reddish side, like reddish orange side. All right. But make sure that like the actual flame itself is the brightest part, right? And even on the Balrog itself, like I see you're going for like a super black, like get some red on him, you know? Like this flame is going to affect him. Okay? Right, so it's that reddish tone will, instead of using like gray, like you can use more reddish shadows around where it's casting on him. Okay, and this is maybe like a little too much, like we can, the strength of saturation here is maybe slightly too high, so I can tone that down just a little bit, but that's sort of the idea. Okay, and if you want to make it look really glowy, the next step, right, is just the only way to make something look super bright is to make the other areas look really dark in comparison. All right. So if you want to make this thing look like super, super bright, what we have to do is like darken the rest of the scene. Okay. So that means like taking this all down in order to make the flamey bright areas look that much brighter in comparison. All right. So like reducing the values elsewhere will just make those lights look stronger in contrast, you know? Like the difference between that and from this and this, right? It now makes those flames look more intense. All right. So, and then the core of the actual flame is always going to be the brightest part. So you find it's like the reverse of edge highlights, right? You want to paint the like inner part of the flame. The source of the flame is like the brightest section, right? So anywhere where the flame like starts has to be the most intense parts. Where you've gotten quite a bit of that right, but I think you could push it even more. Okay. So something like that, right? Now it looks burny. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's jump to the next guy. Gonna look at Masso. Masso, did you post an updated version of this guy later? You did. All right. Just trying to keep track. Okay. And there, and there. And let me look at this. Okay. This is a weird bust. The front view is not so great on this guy. He looks like a bird. Yeah. Does anybody know where this is from? I am not familiar with this figure. I'm gonna say something, and I hope whoever made this figure doesn't get their feelings hurt. But I don't think this is the best figure. I think there is a certain level of this is the best you're gonna get out of this sculpt. Yeah, I mean, I like what you're doing with the two light sources. I think in general, there is some... Well, one thing that's really weird is that, and is not helping this figure at all, is that this dude has no eyebrows. And that's making him look weirder than he is. So maybe you can, like, freehand some eyebrows on him. Might help a little. It didn't help. Okay. So in terms of general volume stuff, like, I think like you need to round some things out a little bit more. All right. So like try and make the forehead a little more round. He's got like a bit of cone head thing going on. The like nose could also be more rounded, so it's not quite so bird beaky, you know. That would probably help quite a bit. Like, I like the colors that you're working with. They're cool. He's also a little like, what's the reverse of cross-eyed? So this eye, like, could move more centralized, right? You want it more like here, so that he's like looking forward. Right? Something like that. The beard itself, pretty good, but yeah, I think you could use like some longer strands, like try and make these a bit longer in terms of the strands. Okay, similar thing that we talked about on gems, you can have some of these lines like come up into the skin a little bit more. So like have them like really like cross over into the skin a little bit. That'll make this line not so like perfect. Okay. Thanks, Lumi. Appreciate it. Yeah, I would definitely try and give him some eyebrows or something. I don't know. Okay. I honestly I think it's pretty cool from the side. Like the side view is actually pretty cool. But yeah, there's just too much he's just like the volumes from the front are like not rounded enough. I think you just need to like, you're doing some of your highlights a little too sharp and it's making like everything look really sharp from the front. Like they're so small that it makes everything from the front view look like really, really, really sharp. And if you round this out more, it's going to feel more natural. Okay. And like you would definitely get some light like in here on this facial feature, right? So like we can connect that a little bit. Same over here, like this little line, right? Instead of like a little line, it should be a bit softer on the feature, right? So like here, right, you get this light like kind of up into the upper lip. And then this connects down and it's not quite so, right? What I'm talking about is like right here, there should be some light like here. Okay. Connecting that will make him not look so bird beaky. Yeah, it's a weird one. It's a tough figure, and yeah, the main view is just like definitely not dead on. I'm thinking he would probably look better from slightly to the side. And yeah, same deal with like the hair up here, right? Like let some of this like come up a little higher, you know. Okay. All right. Let's go to the next one. Sebastian with Coffee Girl. All right. Pretty cool. Oh wait, no, we've got more to get through before that. Hold on. There was others. Okay, that was Maso. This is Katarina. So old classic. Some classic Lucas Pina. Black Crow, I believe. This old Black Crow figure. All right, let's look at what we got. Okay, so pretty cool. I like what you've, I like sort of colors. There's like blue, really blue shadow tones. There's some parts where, yeah, I think like I can see what you're trying to do here with the cast shadow, but I just don't quite think it's coming across. Same with like here, right? It's like you got this sort of cast shadow from his arm. I don't quite think it's reading properly. So I think like the face and stuff is pretty nice. I think I like the hair too. Like the beard is pretty soft. Some of the texturing and stuff is nice. Let's talk about this because I think this is an interesting learning opportunity. I don't have time to, you know, go in super depth on every single part. So, okay, the important thing when you're doing cast shadows, all right? This is the most important aspect. You cannot have shadows in shadows, all right? Something is either in shadow or it's not in shadow, all right? So you have this shadow tone here, okay? This is the shadow tone. We'll say like this is the shadow tone of the sleeve, okay? So this needs to be the shadow of his arm, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to flatten this quite a bit, right? So it's like this, if this is the shadow, then that's what it is, okay? Now you can add some extra adjustments as needed to create like a smaller volumes. There's these things called occlusion shadows, but this is like the starting point, right? So you have a shadow of his sleeve here, right? Let me change the color so you can see this. Okay, you have the shadow of his sleeve right here. This is a volumetric shadow. This is a volumetric shadow. This is a cast shadow, right? They're both just not getting light, all right? So when you have a cast shadow and a volumetric shadow meet each other, they should just disappear into one another, right? Then where you have areas where it's like getting close to his arm, right? Now, or like close to another element, then you can have the shadow get even darker, right? That can happen, right? Like what I'm talking about is like areas like this where it's like underneath, right? It turns black, right? Because there's light cannot get in there. So you have, that's these shadows, right? The shadows in between my fingers are occlusion shadows, okay? This underneath my hand is a form shadow, okay? But if I go like this and I cast another shadow, right? They don't become, the shadow under my hand does not change. I can't make it darker by casting a shadow over top of it. It's just not the way it works. Okay. So, one is to simplify, right? Then you can introduce some occlusion shadows where there's wrinkles and things where you need. Okay? Now, my thing is that I'm just not so sure that the lighting direction is super clear for that in general, because you have like really strong shadows here where they're like, if the light is coming in from this, like straight in from this direction to cast a shadow of his arm like that, most of this stuff would be in light, right? You would have like much more light on these parts of his body, right? So my recommendation would honestly be like, you don't always need them, right? If they're not adding something in terms of like the dramatic nature of the lighting or the silhouette, right? Like, don't just do them because they're cool, right? Do them if they like if they help tell the story or like set the mood for the ambience. Here I think it would honestly just be better to like have kind of normal lighting on his arm. So one, you get like the silhouette of his arm here. Okay. The other thing about cast shadows is like that you have to be really consistent with them. So like as the light comes around, like probably much more, if the light is coming in from that direction, probably much more of his body would be in shadow. So, Jim Jeff, right? Look at my hand, okay? Everything gets darker, right? So as I cast a shadow over my hand, there's now a cast shadow, but the occlusion shadows get darker also. So occlusion shadows are like, they're their own thing, okay? They're basically like, they're just, whenever two objects are close to each other, you have like a just reduced amount of light in areas where two objects are like close together, okay? So whatever the values are there, they just get darker. All right, so that's kind of that. The actual face and stuff I like, the bird I like. Some of the line work on the, this could maybe be like a little tighter, right? So like, how do I show this? Like there's like some gaps here. I think the texture could be like a little tighter, right? You could have like a few more lines. The weave is like a bit thick at the moment, right? So maybe like double or triple the amount of lines because of the scale, right? Like you're talking about something that's at an extremely small scale, so that line thickness or the distance between them should be really tiny. Right now it's closer to like a plaid than it is like a heavy weave. So like a canvas or something. So I would try and get like double or triple the amount of lines in there. All right. Okay. Let's think about some of this also, like some of this blue should probably show up even in the shadow area, the other shadow areas, right? So you have like slightly different shadows on this side. So some of this blue should probably like wrap under his nose. Probably a little bit more should show up like in the shadows of like the greens. Then I think you could also push the light maybe on his beard, right? So like if you're going for a dramatic light source, like really like that means we need to separate the sides a little more. So like more light on the light side, heavier shadows on the shadow side, right? This like chiaroscuro style of like really intense light and shadow. You have to have intense both to make it, work, right? For them to play against each other, you have to have them. You can't have one without the other, So like push, don't be afraid to like push that light more too, in order to, just like we were talking about on the Balrog, where it's like you can't make something look really bright without dark. You can't make something look really dark without brightness either. You have to like push the contrast more in order to really separate those values and have two really intense sides. Last little thing I want to talk about is like try and maybe like define some of his wrinkles and stuff a little bit more, right? Like here, we can push the light a little bit more into these areas. Okay, things like on his face. Okay, something like that. Yeah, the ambience is really cool. Okay, it's next one. Next. Work in progress. I'm having difficulty making the horns and veins appear to be glowing. Okay. The Dragon King. Talk about this one pretty fast. We've talked about a bit of glow, right, already. So how do you make something look glowing? Well, you got to make certain things have to be bright. All right, so we need to come in with like a white, and you want the inner areas, right? Like things glow from the inside. Okay. So you have to like paint the cracks between the horns. Okay, it's like a reverse wash, right? Where a wash, like you shadow the recesses. Well, we're doing the opposite. In fact, you've probably seen El Miniaturista do it with like white ink. Juan does it quite a bit. He'll use like white ink to like white in these like recesses. Okay. I'm gonna sneeze again. Woo. Okay, so you have to like do stuff like that where you paint in the white, right? And then we do the same thing with the veins. Okay. So the veins need to be like the actual vein itself needs to be like the brightest thing. Okay, so wherever the heck the veins are. Right, so if we're doing this vein like it's glowing, right, it's going to be like this. So you got to paint that thing like intensely white. Okay, something along those lines. All right, and now in order to make it look, so it doesn't look like it glows yet, that's, right? So how do you make it glow? Well, now you've got to come back with like whatever color it's going to be glowing. I assume it's this like bright, super bright, intense electric blue color. Okay. And then around the vein, right, you have to add this like bright color. You're basically painting like, think of like a lightsaber. How do you tell what color a lightsaber is? You know, when you see a lightsaber, right, it's like a line, right? It's like a line of color. And then towards the middle of that line, it gets like even brighter, right? Until like at the very center, it's like pure white in the middle, right? But the pure white in the middle is not what tells you what color that a lightsaber is. It's the glow around the outside that tells you what color it is. So that's what we're trying to achieve, is like first you paint the white, then you can come around and like paint around the the veins in this more like intense blue. And if you cover some of the white, that's fine. You can come back in and just like paint the center of it white again, right? Right, so something like this. And the same thing goes for these guys, right? So you want like around the center to be like that. Does this make sense? I hope this makes sense. Okay, so it's like reverse recess shading. It's like the closer you get to the thing that's glowing, the brighter it gets. So more saturated, and then in the very center you get like super pure white. Okay. All right. JRK. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we will look at the next ones. All right. So I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Random question: a textured material, does it lose the texture more when it's in shadow? Yes, because texture is made of light and shadow. Who's that? Ray in Deeps. Hi, and hi, Dr. Painting. Doug. All right, let's look at this guy. So this one's cool. It seems to be. Oh, let's read the comment first. I just finished this bust and I'd like to have some feedback during the next session. My third attempt at painting NMM elements, and I'm struggling with the technique and choosing the right colors and not satisfied with the face. In particular, the shadow side. Okay. So, one, I like the kind of texturing, the gem. This is sort of wool texturing that I was talking about. These are a little big, but that's kind of the idea I was trying to say with like this sort of texture. Thanks, Ray. Glad you enjoyed the video. Okay, so here's sort of what we can do. So shadows in general, I think on the face are not bad. I like the kind of volumes of the face. I'm guessing this was maybe based off of Mark's a little bit. Mark's box art. One thing about the shadows here is that we can define these a little bit more. All right, so we're going to paint like the shadow of his brim, right? Let's make a new layer. Okay, something like this, right? So we can go a little bit more intense. And yes, the shadow would get a little more intense, right? We get a little bit more black as it gets closer to the brim of the hat, right? Then we can come back now and soften this a touch. So shadows do tend to get sharper the closer they are to the object. But this is all pretty dang close. So I like this sort of angle that you have here. I think we could push some of the light on the face a little bit more in certain spots. Right, these are also these little lines like here, like you can push this light up into here a little bit more. Right, we can push this light a little bit. But overall, I think like generally, yeah, like trying to avoid too much of these like lines on the face. You don't really want those. All right, so one thing is this, like this Cupid's bow here, you tend to have light like this, and then this should connect, right? So like if the light is coming from this direction, okay, this side of the Cupid's bow should be in light, right? And then the other side is in light. So you don't have like a dark shadow like running all the way around it. All right, let's push the light just a touch more, and then we can add in some like real like bright highlight spots in a couple areas, like on the nose. Okay, you also, from this angle, you'd probably have like a light here where the nose starts to transition. Okay, a little bit of light here, and then connect these two together. All right, something like that. Okay, push this light a little bit. Push that, and then on his chin just a touch. All right, now this is shadow, okay? Right, like this is the cast shadow of his face, but the light on this side of his face is also in shadow, so we need to create some more shadow on the side of the face where the light is coming from, right? So if the light is coming from sort of like this, okay, we need some of this side of his face to be a bit more in shadow, right? So that means like darkening down a little bit over here, right? Like around this and here, right? So you get more silhouetting to his face as you get to the shadow side. Even the nose, like the bottom of the nose and around the side could be a little more shadowed. So like shadowing around the nostril a little bit, or like underneath the nose, right? Something like that. Okay. Hello, Inferno. Huh? Okay. Yeah. So like we could push the shadows a little bit more, some areas, right? Just have that shadow side of his face just a little darker, so the light and shadow side are a little more clear. Okay. And then yeah, push these highlights a little bit where you need them. Maybe a little highlight on the lip, right? Okay, now for the metallics, right? So let's say you're working on, I think the color on the NMM, like the gold is good. I think on the steel is pretty good too. Like you're shifting the colors pretty well. So, but what we want to do is we want to define a little bit more. So like this is like pretty rough right here, but we want to think about like where this light is going to hit. So something like the on this badge, okay? We want to try and like define some of these edges and lips a little bit more, right? Like this little bead right here should be well defined around the lip. Okay, something like on the whatever this thing is, right? Like we can define that edge a little bit more, soften some of these shapes out. But in general, yeah, I think the color is actually quite nice. It's just like getting the shapes a little bit more correct, right? And then yeah, defining the edges really well. Right, even on this thing, like you can define that other edge. Like on his cuff, assuming it's supposed to be, like a metallic-y kind of thread or whatever, like this edge should be pushed. Okay. On the like trigger guard, right? So you should have like a light that goes across this little thing here, right? This should catch light right here. And all these little elements, right? You want to catch these edges. Okay, something like that, right? But like the rivets and stuff, like, no, man, I think they're looking good. On this guy up here, right, you're shifting like a little more greenish, right? So it goes from like this sort of, well, this is kind of yellowish, but like it should, if it's reflecting the sky, like it depends on if it's reflecting the sky or if it's reflecting the sun. So, but like this section you could maybe push further, assuming this is supposed to be like that shiny material, right? Okay, so something like this, and then you could push it even a little further. Why did that get darker? What happened? Right? So like really putting that highlight in there to make that read as like that glossy black. Okay. And that'll give you that material contrast you're looking for. No, I mean, I think the color and stuff is good. It's just being a little bit more refined, being a little bit more thinner with some of the edges and stuff. But I think like the epaulets and stuff look good. Yeah, I think it's strong. Just trying and like the white sash is nice. I think the texture of the clothes is nice. Like here you could maybe darken this a little bit more. So like instead of this like bright, you could go like a little darker and more saturated in some of these elements. So this is a tough thing because here you have this like double edge, and this can be really hard. But when you're doing these like non-metallic kind of things, you will often get this like double edge reflection. So like the inside and outside edge, right? And then a lot of times they'll actually like, you have to think that this is like one thing. So unless it has like a wash or something or like a tarnish in it, these will actually like, this is a little tiny volume that will connect these two. Okay. So you will often get a little reflection like this, where it's like this edge like connects with the other one. Something like that. That is a tough thing to pull off, right? But yeah, that's like if you want to really like step up the the NMM in terms of realism. That is definitely like these little finishing touches, things that will make this look like extra shiny. Yep, so let's look at the sort of difference here, right? Where it's like before and after, right? Like which one looks shinier, you know? Okay. Yeah, and I think on some of these parts you could go a little darker also, right? Like, don't be afraid to push some of the contrast in these areas. Something like that. Okay? More contrast, more better when it comes to non-metallic. All right. All right. Let's move on to the next one. Okay. Mirage. Mr. Lucas. All right. Big guy. More crazy NMM things happening. Which one? These are a bit blurry. Hold on. Weak. Okay, I guess this one's the best. Froggy PhD with the raid. Hello. Welcome in. Thanks. What were you doing? How was your stream? We are reviewing some viewer submitted models. So in general, I like this, okay? What I would say, and this is hard to see, I need to look at, I don't have a great angle of it from the side. I'm worried some of these like Earth NMM reflections that you've got going on are like too high. Did a community review and feedback. I think I was doing the same. Ah, nice. Didn't know I stream. Yeah, well, I only stream on Wednesdays typically, but I started doing these like feedback streams. Okay, so all right. So we got to consider like if this is a shape, like let's think about the armor of the horse. Okay, so if we looked at the horse's head from the front, I'm a horse. Okay. I'm a horsey. I've got a nose. Right? And then he's wearing this armor. And this armor is like this. Okay? Over his head. Give him his ears. Right? And then he's got like his armor on. Okay? And he's got another layer of armor on the back of his head and another layer. Okay? So this armor, we have to consider what the curve is. So is it like this where it curves underneath? Right? Or does it stop at like the horizon? Okay. So based on this angle here on the sides, we'll change how this reflection is. Okay. So right now, I think this reflection is like too harsh. I don't quite, it's like too chromy, I think, for how, quite the effect you're going for. Right. So I would consider softening it down a little bit. Something like in between these two with like this kind of light greenish. Okay. And also it's like, would it be there or would it be like a little lower? Like should the horizon be like slightly more down here? Right? So like where is the horizon is really important when you're doing like this what some people might call sky earth. Like this white goes really high and the sky is going to be much more on top and would probably come down a bit further, okay? Then yes, the horizon tends to desaturate and increase in light a little bit, unless you're reflecting the sun, okay? The sun is going to be the whitest part, but it will get brighter, right? So I'm guessing it's supposed to be like trees or something is reflecting in the distance, right? So over here, right, like this probably too high for where like the line of the horizon is, okay, based on like the angle I'm looking at. So try and bring these down a little, try and soften them a little, okay. And then you can like darken them in or do whatever other effect you want to do. Like this I think works quite well here on the legs. Honestly, like a lot of this looks quite nice. Now, the next thing I would have to say is that like the gold, so you have like this color information in the steel where you've got like all this like browns and greens and blues. But what happens to the gold, right? Like the gold has none of that, right? So what do we have to do? Oh, thanks for raiding. I'll see you at Adepticon. Enjoy. So, what do you have to do in the gold? Okay, well, if this is supposed to be moving up in terms of like, if this is going to start reflecting the ground, we have to shift the green, the gold reflections also to be more greenish where it's reflecting the ground, okay? And that means that the sky reflections, right? That means these brown reflections might be slightly more orangish because they're supposed to be reflecting like brown from the ground, right? Okay, so also play with not just if you're going to play with the color in the steel, you need to play with the color in the gold also. Like you have to do both, okay? In general, I like the color in the metals, but yeah, you do it everywhere, okay? I also think that the blue is getting a little white in some places. Like some of this looks like it could be a little smoother, right? I like the like purplish you have, but sometimes I think like it's really easy to kind of overdo these parts. So maybe like just a bit more saturated blue might help instead of instead of this like super white highlight that you got on the arm, on the horse. So maybe something slightly more like this to show that color of the material. Right, like this highlight is very white. So a little bit more bluish that starts to shift like ultramarine purplish as it goes down. Okay. The banner is really cool. The metallics I think in general are quite good. Yeah, I think everything is quite good. Now the base, the face is good. I like the like steel here. The base could use something. The base, this is the same thing we did earlier, but like you can do a little of this vignetting here on the base too. So something like you take like a dark brownish whatever, and we'll apply some of that. Oh, like the airbrush, so you can, so we can darken some of this area a little bit where we don't want on the edges, you know, like around the outside. This will help again pull a little more attention to the character. Okay, maybe even more black. We can also do a little shadow like under the horse. Okay. Something like that. Yeah. All right. Cool. I think that's kind of the main things for me. So like, yeah, really think about those side reflections. Also, yeah, anyways. Okay, cool. Next. Dragon Eye miniatures, hello. Yeah. So this is going pretty well. Like kind of the face and stuff so far. What I would say here is, all right, so let's talk about the shape of the hair highlight. So what I would like to see on the hair here, something like this. Okay, instead of like this little spot right here, let's make it and okay, you want the like highlight should run like a little more like across the hair like that. Okay, so something like this, right? So it should kind of like run in a little line across the head. And you can do that by like painting the lines, right? But that's a bit more of the shape that you want to see. Like it should be like almost like a halo across the head, right? And then we can darken down some of these other areas a little bit more, right? So the top of the head's not quite so bright because like black hair is more about reflection than it is about anything. Right, so you want that reflectivity there. Now, the gold like needs color, okay? So if you're going for gold, like you gotta get some of these like dark browns and stuff in here because right now it has none of that. So I'm gonna make this and then let's do this. It's like multiply, right? So we've got to get some like color in here. We want to think about this as like a cylinder. Where's the main reflection gonna be? Right, so I want to like darken some of this down. And then we want to get some more like of these like actual gold tones in here. Right, so these like kind of yellowish, orangey tones. Right now it's just like so washed out. Okay, something like this. And then, yeah, then we can like play with like more of the yellow like band. So it's like a cylinder, right? So it like runs like something like this through the center, right? You can play with like secondary ones. So you could have like another reflection there and there. But you want this like main reflection point, right? To give that effect. And then you'd have to come back and you would like redefine around these lines, right? So come back in, painting, right? Oop, it's way too thick. Right, so you come back in and like draw in the dark lines. All right, something along those lines. And then yeah, edge highlighting all this stuff. So you want to paint all the edges in and make these nice and white. Nice and bright on the edge, right? So this should all like catch edges. This should have, all of these would have little edges on them. Okay. something like that. Right? And you do this on literally all of it, and it takes a while, but it's works out, right? You can see the difference, like from where it was before, right? You were like here where everything is just kind of blown out, and then like adding shadow, adding that extreme light, defining the edges, right? Skin's pretty nice. I don't have too much to say there. I think you could define some of the facial features a little bit more. The eyebrows are kind of thick, a little chunky. Feel good, MDTV. Thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. Okay, so all right, so that's my big feedback for you. All right, next. Okay. What do we have here? We have a flat. I am not super familiar with painting flats, but I imagine they are like painting anything else. So, or like doing a, two-dimensional painting. So, big thing I notice, right, is like some of the volumes here, right? Like the arm, right? We're losing some shape on the arm. Okay, so like this bicep should have some shape, the arm should have some shape, even the tricep would catch like some light, right? So if we gotta think like the light's coming in from this like top left, it looks like. I'm a little confused on actually the lighting direction because most of it seems to be coming in from the top left, but then this is like the inverse. So I think like here, right? We want to try and like give some shape to the arm here. Okay. Give some shape to the, like, think about shapes really is like the most important thing. Like the back of the neck would be in light. This is correct. This is good. The palm of the hand would basically all be in light. This forearm would be in light, right? Then we can think about shadow. Okay, like this part of the neck. Probably this shoulder would be a bit in shadow. This sort of the front of the face would be in shadow. This back of the arm, right, would be in shadow. And then like underneath the arm, right? So shape is really important here, right? Like we're trying to draw the volumes. So try not to lose the general volume of what's going on when thinking about this stuff, okay? Like and then you can come back and like add in like actual highlights to stuff. Like we can get highlight on the neck here, right? This part of the neck would get a highlight. The jaw, even underneath the jaw, probably from this angle would get like a bit of light. Okay. Defining the hands and fingers and all of that good stuff. Okay. And actually this bicep would probably be something more like this. Because if the light's coming in from that direction. All right, so just consider these shapes more. Also consider like you're doing an illustration here, so you can play with like some lighting like this. Like you can play with cast shadows here because you're painting a flat surface as is. So maybe this part of the cloth here might cast a shadow across the arm. Right, we're doing an illustration on a slightly three-dimensional surface. So try and push light where you need it and then reduce light where you don't. But like think of the big shapes, right? I don't know if this is based off an illustration or not, but it might help to actually like look at the, if it is based off an illustration, it might help to use that as reference material for this thing. But like geometric shapes is like so important when working on this sort of stuff. Like you don't want, the whole point is to make it not look flat, right? Yeah, and then a big thing also is going to be coming back and like really cleaning up lines and everything. Right, this outlining is going to help a lot just to define elements more, clean up. And like you start to lose shapes here. Okay. Based on a Mucha illustration? I don't know that. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would use the photo as reference and try and break it down into shapes. Like you can you send the reference real quick while we go shoot over the reference, and I will I'll talk about like breaking it down into forms while I go over another person's figure. Rui. Damn, dude. Face is pretty good, huh? So, all right. I haven't seen this one yet. So Rui does private coaching with me. So like, this must be a new project he's working on. Yeah, man. Like that face is pretty good so far. Okay. Yeah, overall, like I think like general facial volumes is like quite nice. I think there's maybe a couple areas where we could push some things. So like, I like this dark shadow you have in here. I'm gonna grab this. I think over here could maybe be like a little bit darker. I think also like you're losing a bit of the eye shape over here. So like, don't lose this shape too much. Okay, like he should, I get he's got like a double kind of wrinkly thing, but like don't overdo the like bags. A little more highlight on the nose, define here a little bit. Okay, something like that. I think you'd also like push the shadow here a little bit more. So as you come around to like this side of the face, like we want to try and add a little bit more shadow onto the like side of the head, right? That's like really facing away from the light. Where this side maybe needs to come up just a little bit. So like I'm going to increase the light over here just a touch. And then the next thing I'm gonna say is like, yeah, this thing that we have talked about multiple times tonight. Like, I'm gonna paint some of the skin tone into the beard, right? So I'm gonna cover a bit of the beard. And then I'm going to come back with the like light beard color. And the beard might be like a bit too blue at the moment. It's very bluish. So I would try and like warm up the gray here a touch. So first thing I'm going to do is like because I like this gray, right? This is like a nice grayish tone for like gray hair. Okay. So I'm going to like get some of the light like a bit more towards that. The blue in the shadows is fine, right? But as we get to like the midtones and lights, we need to get away from that blue. Otherwise his hair looks like icy. Okay, so like more neutral gray here, because your lights get more yellow, right? Like this is more yellow than this, okay? So here, and then I'm going to get a little bit more light. And I want to get the shape of the hair first. Like, so like the hair has like an overall shape to it. And then, yeah, then you've got to come in and like, now you can start to paint these lines and like bridge into the skin a little, okay? And then we can push it even more. The lesson of tonight is how to paint soft looking hair that blends into the skin properly. It's the theme of the evening. Okay, so you see like now that I've added this more neutral gray, how blue this looks now, right? It's like it was really blue before, and now that I've added some more of this like color to the light, like now it looks like really blue, right? So try and mess around with that, all right? Okay, generally, yeah, other than that, I like how it's going. I like where it's going. Obviously, you haven't done much more than the face. Right, the shadows of the eyebrows are probably also too black, right? So like start with a more neutral gray, like something like this, right? I'll do it on this one. Okay, so start the eyebrows with them. You don't want this black on here. That doesn't really make sense. So start with a slightly more neutral gray and then build your way up from there. All right. Bastion Minis and Jeremy Velasca. Hello, welcome. And feel good. Oh no, I've got. All right, cool. Makes sense, Rui. Yeah, I hope so. I really do like how it's coming. One other little thing here. I think this line could be like, you could try and get this line like a little lighter, a little more pink, and a little thinner, right? So we get this sort of line like this. that is that, right? Right? It's that line. Okay, and it's kind of glossy and shiny, so you can but very good. I like how it's coming along. It's nice, right? Okay. Next. Ethan. Oh, did someone post the picture of the piece of artwork? Oh, right, yeah. Okay, so this is weird. So there's some interesting things happening here. So let's look at this real quick, though. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what's happening with this shadow over here. Like, this is a little weird. But let's look at shape, right? So the light is clearly, like, coming in and hitting like this. Before Twitch gets mad at me. All right. So. Okay. So what I want you to see is this. So what we're going to do, what I'm going to do real quick, I'm going to use green because there's like none on it here. Try and think about these more like shapes, okay? And what I mean by shapes is like, yeah, everything is kind of smooth, but like look like here, right? Like there is this light like this, right? So this is all this here, right? I'm drawing in the shadow shapes, right? So there's a shadow shape like this, okay? This is a shadow shape, right? This is a shadow shape. Okay. Don't worry about these things. All right. These are like, those are like bounce lights. Okay. Okay. So those are bounce lights. Don't worry about those. We're focused only on like the big broad shapes first. Right. Like her arm is supposed to be in shadow, but she has this like bounce light that's kind of like running like this. Look at like the big overall shapes first. Okay, even on like the fabric, like it's really clear on the fabric, right? Like you have these like little shapes like this. Okay, so if you can break it down into these, it'll make painting the rest of it much easier. Now, most of down here is like all in shadow. Okay, but up here it's like this huge area of light is like you paint that first. This is basically all one flat color. There's not like a lot of variation in here. Okay, so you paint this all, like you block it all in, right? Block this in, and then you just blend in between the two. Okay? And that blend is much shorter than what you think it is. All right. This stuff, this is like little effects. But in general sense, that arm, we're trying to see like the general light and shadow. Okay? All right. Ethan. Pretty good. Coming along. What I'm going to say is I think you need to introduce something of a little more interest to the scales. Like I like the red. I like how the metallics and everything are going. But I think that the actual like scales are a little kind of more boring at the moment. So I think you could use some color variation here. So like what I'm gonna do is they're like very yellow, so and super desaturated. I'm gonna grab like an orangish tone. Okay, something like this, right? And I'm gonna use this as like a shadow color, even like a red, like this reddish orange, right? So we can like darken some of this area, right? Like we can push the shadows like a bit more and introduce a little color to it. You can see because this is the complementary, like this works. It looks like you've done it a little bit here, like on the neck. I think you can do it like a little bit more, right? So like, let's try and like play around with the overall light and shadow a touch more on this stuff. What do you think of the axe? I'm struggling with the flat. Yeah, no, the axe looks fine. This is actually maybe a little more than I would even go. I would probably like tone that back just a bit. I think it's maybe a little overdone. You're trying to like over complicate it. I don't think it needs to be that much. You're like a little more subtle there. All right. It could be pretty flat because the blade is like the interesting part. Then the other thing I would say is like, yeah, you got this like nice yellow in here. I would like to see almost like something slightly more intense. I would filter some color over top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab like a green like this, and I'm just going to like push the saturation a little. Right, so like something just a bit more intense. So like eliminating some of that white, right? And let some of that like bright green come through. Because his hood is so like intense green. And then once you've done that, then you can come back with like these slightly more warm yellow colors and like redefine some of these scales. Right. And push this up even more. Now, another thing you can do, I like that you're connecting the scales a lot, right? That's really good. Okay. A lot of times with these like sorts of scales, you'll get like you actually get this like color that like happens in between, because they're not like layered on top of each other, right? So you'll sometimes get like lines that go like through the scales, right? They're not like dragon scales where they're not like this, right? Where they're like layered on top of each other, you know? It's like flat, right? Like a grid. So you get a little bit of these like lines connecting them, which I see you've done in some areas, but like you can do it a little bit more where you push the lines like in between. So my big thing would be like, yeah, like try and introduce a little bit more color variation back into it. Like it's just so white at the moment. Let's add these all together. Right, so like overall, like just pushing the color, and some of these like warm shadows and stuff like will help a lot to like add interest. Okay, so just like glazing color and stuff. In terms of stuff down here, like that, maybe you could, some of these stitches and stuff could probably be defined a bit better. Like you could have darker lines surrounding them, right? Like, oh, what the heck? Right, some of these could like be a little better defined around. Just make them more clear. And then, yeah, like just outlining some of these metallic elements a little more. Right, like nice dark lines around some of this stuff. Yeah, man, he's cool. Yeah, definitely up here, like on these parts, like these need to be more defined, right? What happens is like when you zoom out like this, they lose their edge because they're so small. So like try and like shadow around these things a little bit more so that they stand out better. Even just like painting and the stitching a little, the like line. Like here, I think it's pretty well defined, but you could push it even maybe just a little bit more so that like executioner's hood is really clear, that it's all stitched together. Okay. All right. Other than that, yeah, here on the nose, I think this shape could come out a little bit more. I think you could round this over just a touch. So like bring that light forward just a bit. Something like that. Give him a nice highlight on this horn because it's interesting. Cool. All right. Next. Looked at that. Negative. How many more do we have to go? All right. Last ones. All right. Last two. I mean, honestly, dude, like, I don't know what you want me to tell you. Like, this is going well, like, quite nice. I'm not really even going to draw on this because I think it's really good. Like, maybe some of these edge highlights, like this edge highlight on the axe is like maybe slightly too white. I think you could, like, maybe are shadowing some of the green a little too much. Like it might be like slightly too dark and is losing some shape. Like I'm kind of missing like the overall shape of the finger. Here, I'll draw on it real quick just so you can see the difference. So like when you shadow some of these areas too much, like let's take a green like this. When you push these shadows so deep on these like little guys, like you start to lose some of the shape of the fingers, right? So like by not pushing that shadow so deep, you still want the dark line, right? But instead of like this super, super dark green, you use like a slightly more mid-tone-ish green shadow. You separate you get the overall shape of the finger a little more, and like they become more defined next to each other. Okay, so like even here, like this is maybe slightly too dark. So by doing this, like I can see the silhouette of the finger a little better. Right. Connecting some of this musculature. Right, like why is this down here like so dark? I can increase it just a little bit. And then I can read that shape of his hand like a little better. Like from, oh crap. Well, anyways. Sorry, I painted on the same layer. But you get my idea, right? Like, so one way you like, you don't want to push the shadows so big and deep that like you lose the silhouette, right? So try and keep the silhouette clear. And you can round it maybe a little bit, like may have been slightly too much, but like don't lose the general shape of things, okay? By over contrasting, right? So, okay. Sorry if that was short, but honestly, it's like, it's going really well. Like, this looks really good. I don't have like anything really to say about that. Right? Like, yeah, great job. Like the veins are pretty subtle and nice, and like all this stuff is like super defined. Like the rough metallic texture is really good. Yeah. Yeah, just be careful is all I'm saying. And then Sebastian. Stray Yak, thanks for following, and Bodacious Pie. I like that name. This is good. All right, Sebastian. All right, so generally like it. The what's it called is really good. Let me ask you a question. Where's the big focus on this guy? Where we got a lot of focus? There's two things. One of them is actually important. The other one's less important. Okay. Where are our Aries drawn? So should be drawn here, right? And the other thing, I think actually the mug should take some. And Sammy Yummy, thanks. The other one is this is like drawing too much attention right now. We want to try and draw a bit more attention to the face, okay? So oh yeah, it's that masculine's meta for sure. All right, so one, like I would take and I would tone down the tail a little. So it's probably a little too much right now. You can leave like the tip a little right, like that's okay. But I think like, I also think it could be like a bit more reddish if you're going for like demon instead of, like it's a little pink right now. Okay. All right. Lighting on the face is pretty good. Some things could be smoother. Some things are like really sharp where they should be like less sharp. I don't quite understand what's happening with the nose, like why there's this like double thing here. Right. Something, try and make that like nose highlight more rounded, you know? Also the Cupid's bow, like if you're going to highlight one part of it, you kind of want to like highlight down the lips a little bit too. Okay. Honestly, I think that's maybe too much. I would go with like more this like skin tone and try and make that like much more subtle. The nose shadow could definitely be stronger. Right. So, like in terms of size, it could be a little bigger. This is good, but it could be softer. This is good. I don't quite like this line right here. So typically when you have this kind of shape, you actually get a highlight like right here on the, whatever this part is, right where it like bends, right? So it's like right there. Okay. So what I would suggest is to soften this so she doesn't look quite so angry. So we're gonna like chill out on the nose a little bit here. So something like that to sort of start over. And then you get this like highlight like right here. Okay. Carson, thanks for following. Generally the eyes and stuff are good. I'd say like you could probably clean them up a little bit. There's some wonkiness happening here, but could maybe clean them up a little bit. Definitely need to like, sorry, let me grab this dark color. Definitely need to like outline around the mouth a little bit more. Something like that. And then she needs like a good hair highlight, okay? So you need to maybe increase the light here. Consider like, is it getting warmer? So probably want to come this way a little bit, slightly more into these like pinkish tones. And then like, yeah, brighter than that. Right, so she needs like a good hair highlight like around here. Then you could also like, why is this so dark in here? Like there would be some light in here, so increase the light like a bit on that area. And then yeah, like punch in this like silky highlight here. I would also, yeah, really consider like shifting that color like slightly more magenta-y as you get into the highlights, because the hair is like so similar to the sweater at the moment, like in terms of color, that you're losing a little bit, right? Like you're losing some separation between the two because of how close they are. So like just a little bit of this slightly more magenta color in the highlights of the hair instead of like whitish highlights will help give some color separation between the two. And then the last thing is, yeah, grab some slightly grayish blue like this and just like filter over the cup a little bit. Like it doesn't need to be pure white, right? Like the top part can be, but the like side of it doesn't necessarily need to be quite so intense and white. And then the last little thing is like just try and round out her cheeks a little bit. Could we get some feedback on this Gundam? Yeah, it's in that cabinet, like right over there. And if they want feedback on it, they can come upstairs. This is my roommates. Guess apparently Dave just wanted me to show it off on stream. Look at that bad sanding job. Sand better. Huh? Look at that little mold. Look at that. All right. Yeah. Thanks for hanging out, guys. That'll be it for this stream. Cool. Thanks. Thanks for submitting. Okay. If you want to also submit your model for feedback, you can become a sub and yeah, and join the Discord. And there you can find the Feedback Friday channel. We do this every other Friday. So, and then normal streams are on Wednesday. Well, I will talk to you guys on the next one. Bye-bye. Bye.